Good afternoon, everybody. Terry Bell here from Bell & Company, doing a webinar today, rather dramatically. We call it the world of dispute resolution. And it gives us an opportunity, if you like, to showcase some of the work we're doing, not in terms of showing off, although we're not averse to that, but it's more to explain the sort of other work that we get involved. Traditionally, we're debt negotiators, but sometimes our work develops into what we call their commercial disputes. Often gets quite ugly, such as we're going to refer to a case in a minute where there's a divorce punch-up, and there's no other way of putting it. And sometimes cases drift. We've got one the other day where we're looking to get involved, and it's 8 years it's been going on. It's a proceeds of crime case, but that's as an aside. But there's a phrase there we put into that first slide there. Why do we get involved? Sometimes I think that when we're in the middle of a case, why do we get involved? But I find them very rewarding. There is the financial aspect, but it's also the ability to sort of pit our wits against all different professions and keep steadfast to what you're trying to actually achieve. Now, if anybody's offended by anything that we say in here, I mean, I do have a bit of a dig at other professions sometimes. That isn't what this is about. What we're trying to do here is just put across how things we think should pan out. We've got quite a bit of experiences over the time, and there's some quite tricky, complex and decent sized cases. So we'll get going, if that's okay. I think we've gone past 1 o'clock here. We're in sunny Harrogate. It was sunny now, about 20 minutes ago. There's a good snowstorm out there. We're getting plenty of snow here. I'm sure other people are dotted around the country. So what we're going to do now, we're going to get going. So if we can put up our first slide, this is all remote. So there's our little book. It's free. If anybody wants it, you're very welcome. I think you're going to get it sent anyway, so there's no choice. But if you want a hard copy, just give us a shout. It just covers, and it's a slightly lighter way of looking at what is undoubtedly referred to as the business pandemic. As we wait for Rishi Sunak to have his budget on the 3rd of March, which is going to be pretty massive for SMEs and where he's going to take us. So we'll see how he does. So we're looking at dispute resolution. And as we say there, it's a massive subject. It can cover anything, divorce, litigation, very often we're involved in, any form of dispute that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And very often, once you get into that mode of litigation, then essentially the stakeholders sometimes lose carriage of the case. So for instance, if a bank says we're going to give that case to the solicitors and deal with them, it's quite difficult to deal with. And likewise, if we're defending it or our client's defending it, it's also then you've got solicitors involved. It's trying to keep the control of the case. So our role and our job and our mantra is to achieve the very best for our clients, always and every time and always, then we get the rewards. The client gets the rewards and ultimately we get paid, because we mentioned how we get paid in these sort of cases. Huge thing you need in these cases is stamina. It's not for the faint-hearted. You get some people come, we give them a quote, they go to their solicitor or their accountant and they say they'll do it, but don't understand the long horse very often. I've stolen a phrase there, bounce back ability, which is from that crazy football manager Ian Holloway. And you need a certain skill set that goes with it. And this is why we're putting this up as a webinar today, because it's a strange concept. We've got a couple of case studies. The first one, where we're looking at the messiest divorce. It was pretty horrendous, but we got through in the end. It culminated in our client going bankrupt, which, strangely enough, was the best thing she did. You've also then, we're going to discuss the ability to react as cases develop, because even if you've got a nailed-on case, they still need to be put to bed in the right way. So you've got to be ready to pivot. It's a new trendy phrase, which we're using a lot at the minute, exemplified by the fact we did a fantastic marketing plan, and at Christmas, when it all slows down and it's gone mad, and we've ended up throwing it in the bin, starting again. Then we've got another case study there, which is like an exam question, and it just gives a bit more depth in terms of what we do in there. We don't usually like to look at professional negligence, but this was a shocking case of a piece of work, which unfortunately I haven't prepared a graphic, but it will show what's going on there. In some of our other webinars, we've discussed litigation funding, and how we're going to discuss here how that's clouding the issue, as it brings another party, particularly into the decision process, but sometimes in a very good way, in their very economically driven. They want results and they want their pound of flesh. Then we're just going to end on a couple of bits of contact, whatever we want to do. We're also then talking about the developments that we're going to do in terms of webinars. We're going to move away from webinars a bit. We're looking at all sorts where basically we can discuss our work, put it out there, and we're sharing that with you. Whether you want to engage, that's up to you, but it's something that we're going to be developing because that's what we always try and do, keep our marketing fresh and out there. So we're always looking to achieve the best for our client. We're going to talk about how we work on the fees. We work on a retainer and a success fee. So it's in our interest to make sure we do succeed for our clients because that's when the rewards come. In every case, but particularly in dispute resolution, you need to take a whole approach. Every single facet of the case has to be considered and every ramification has to be looked at. That isn't a checklist. That comes with experience, sometimes hard-earned experience. And we even look at the worst-case scenario. Just in case, for instance, if there's a threat of bankruptcy, what are the ramifications? How will it pan out in practical terms? Bankruptcy sometimes is an option we wouldn't say encourage, we'd say for people to consider. It's a very good way of closing things off. There's going to be nothing, no great outcome from it. And it takes a lot of the emotion out of battle. Costs are always very important, including us. But again, it's knowing the full picture. Very often we see litigation get way out of hand. We recently had an insolvency practitioner approach us. He was appointed 9 months ago and have managed somehow to rack up £100,000 of the costs with little or no contact with our client. So again, we need to know what's involved there. Sometimes a few cliches thrown around here, so keep everyone on the same page. Right? Not always easy, as we said there, is making sure we know what the end goal is. And sometimes that needs repeating. It was something I was listening to the other day. And to get someone across or to change somebody's mindset on something can take up to 21 times to get them to change. So it's very important that we keep on that same page and keep driving it and always look to achieve the results that we start, with the goal in sight. Then we all get our rewards. But rarely do you celebrate with litigation or big disputes. It's too painful sometimes. It's very protracted and quite exhausting in some instances, and it doesn't go without a lot of late nights. We recently had a case there where we were under some pressure that came to us late in the day, and we had to pour through a lot of records to get our argument together, which we did. But celebrate, yeah, a little bit, but it's not an open top bus, that's for sure. And as I said there, we work on a retainer and success fee model. The bulk of our fee is payable on success. So we wouldn't take a case on unless there was that opportunity to make sure we realise that success fee, because that's what it's about. That's where, if you like, our profit is. That's our business model. It's worked for 10 years, so with 400 plus clients at the moment. So not big-headed, but I think we're doing something right. We referred to the stamina and bounce back ability. Again, Ian Holloway, copyright. That's just showing that you've just got to keep coming back. These cases sometimes are very ugly. Some nasty things can be said. They can be hurtful. They can be draining. They can be wrong, but it's said and it's out there. And you get people shouting at one another, even if it's an email, line, so and so, and everything else. Right? But it's very, very, very important that you just keep that. You have that ability to keep going. Some of these cases we've been dealing with gone on for years, but you're in it for the long haul. The case study we're going to give in a minute with the farmer was most likely a 4-year case, but had to be done. We did it right. We saw it right the way through. Just a quick thing on the skill set. This is the first one is the main thing that we bring to the party, because we look at the financials, obviously. We look at the accounts, but understand the accounts and give our perception of them. There's not many things I'm very good at, as Mrs. Bell reminds me regularly, but it's understanding the accounts and breaking them down, especially for our legal teams, to make sure they get the element of reality there. Very often they take them verbatim, but if it's going to hit the fan, there's ultimately going to be some form of insolvency here. We need to point out how that's going to work financially. Legally, we don't get involved. It's not our job to be solicitors. If there's the basic measure is, if there's a case number on it, it's a solicitor acting and or direct access barrister. But we will bring our tactical approach to it, because at the end of the day, we're looking at the end goal. They're typically looking at the last email and the file and da-di-da. Ours is always, whatever it takes, let's get to that end goal. It doesn't go quickly, but that's what we've got to do. And you have to be creative. And I'll show you just a secret, not secret, but my best moments come in the bath. I've been looking at all sorts of things about mindfulness, everything else, but in terms of meditation but I still find a half hour in the bath. And strangely enough, other things come into my head. Keep going on about stamina, but so vital. If you haven't got that, don't do it. Don't do it. Get somebody else to do it. Let them do the donkey work. I would say that, but it's so important. As is, bounce back ability. When it goes wrong, which it invariably will do, you will get an email late on a Friday, deliberately sent to absolutely drive you around the twist of the weekend. And it's the ability to sit back, take on board what they're saying, and then go back again. This isn't the case if you're absolutely banged to rights, but if you're in some sort of contentious dispute, you've got to have this, because anything and everything will be thrown both sides. And keep that continual focus on the end goal, as you say, that is so important. It's very hard when you're in a divorce, when all the emotions are flying and he's a lying bastard and she's a so-and-so, da-di-da-di-da. But we've got to just see it through to the end and make sure we understand. So this is the messiest, nastiest divorce which we've been involved in. We've been involved in a few. And this saw a man who was, his wife basically had enough of him. She was away and she had another life, found somebody else. That was all, no judgment there. And on that basis, your man got very nasty with it. She was the commercial person. She was the driving force in the family. And she was the one that aspired to do better herself. She overextended herself, but everything was in her name. And it started to go slightly wrong, and the debt pressure on the debt started to come through when she couldn't service them. And then with the backdrop of the unhappy relationship, it was that definitely had some sort of effect on it all here. But when it got to the divorce proceedings, he was pretty vile, really, some of the stuff he was coming out with, and basically wanted to ruin her. But on the flip side, where he wasn't the commercial guy, he had ridiculous expectations of what he should expect from it. Now, our client was basically underwater with personal guarantees. Business was sort of spluttering and farting, not going anywhere. Properties dropped a wee bit. She had a strange sort of portfolio of properties there. And so it wasn't as they perceived. They didn't have any accounting input. And they got a set of accounts. They did their desktop valuation, da-di-da-di-da, and said, yeah, this is what we're going to get. We also had, and sometimes you get this, excuse my professional friends, but particularly in the divorce world, his solicitor, as I said, there was revving up his client, absolutely giving him the most ridiculous unrealistic expectations, and running up some fees. And they were looking for our client, the lady, to pay the fees. So we brought in a bit of a curveball because our client wanted to get on with her life. She'd had enough. She was pressure all around. The divorce was very nasty, as we say. Pressure was coming to bear across the board. There was a personal guarantee called upon, and we discussed bankruptcy, to which both sets of solicitors were absolutely horrified. Hands were up. Oh, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. Any number of times we asked why not, and neither side could say why. It wouldn't necessarily resolve the settlement here, but it was a fair mark in the sand. Our solicitor took a bad attitude with it, totally misplaced. We had a very good barrister, but we also changed the barrister. But we decided, or the client decided, that bankruptcy would be her route, and consequently we changed solicitor, and we decided from that point on to give advice. Use a solicitor to give advice whilst they take instruction. A very, very important point here. You give instruction, solicitors give advice. The dynamic very often changes with scare tactics and everything else. And more than once we've called out a legal team going down the wrong route and basically scaring a client. In this case, we got a good team together and off we went. From the bankruptcy, there was a lot of fallout, including the judge. He thought we were at our work, which wasn't the case. He had no case for saying what he did. Our client was totally entitled under the Insolvency Act to petition for a bankruptcy, and so she did. And as we say then, nobody goes bankrupt for the crack. So she took the decision. That's what she wanted to do. Huge fallout. But from there, everybody suddenly got a little bit of reality. You got a trustee in bankruptcy who didn't yield a lot from what was in the estate. But it brought a massive dose of reality to this guy and his team. They all turned on one another, and eventually it settled down. He was able to keep the house, had little or no equity in it, and that was what he ended up with. And he ended up with about a 20 grand bill as well. Our client paid her way, sorted the solicitor out with friends and family helping her through it. And 2 years on, it was great. Literally last week when I spoke to her, that she's got a new business. She did a year in bankruptcy as ever, went and got a job. As soon as she got through that first year, she then set up a business. And within 2 years, she's up at that profit level, 137 grand. Got rid of that fall, we call it politely, and life's great. So it's really nice, good to hear. But in amongst that, it's a very dramatic phrase, but in the heat of the battle, that was nasty. You got horrible things being said in court, horrible things being said in email, text, and everything else, and it's not nice. But it doesn't matter. We had to get the client to where she needed to be, and she needed to understand herself what she wanted to do, because when everything's coming at you from all sides, it's quite hard to see the end goal here. As cases go on, there is never one straight path with these, ever. As I say in point 3 there, even if it's nailed on, it will never run smoothly. There'll be other issues. And we'll give you a couple of examples in the next case. But the new trendy phrase, and I'm using it all the time, and I'm not going to apologize for it, is the ability to pivot, which means change direction, obviously, and go somewhere else. In difficult cases, that isn't just a case of going, I'll tell you what, we're not going that way, we're going that way. That doesn't work, because very often there are, as we say, there are a lot of moving parts, and you've got to look at the ramifications for those moving parts if you change direction. So that could be a case of reviewing the costs, reviewing the possible settlement either way. Everything has to be considered. So you've got to be ready as cases develop, as challenges are thrown at you, be ready to do it for sure. So that's how we deal with the reaction and pivoting there. So my dear helper, if you could change the next slide, please, or points. A huge thing, which I've learned, I'm a man of a certain age now, it took me forever to learn this, and a far wiser man than I came up with. Act, don't react. React, and you'd be quite right. Everybody goes nuts, and that happens again because we're all quite emotive in what we do. But if you show a bit of weakness, if you can take on whatever's being said, see it for what it is, why they're doing it. They could be desperate, but react, regroup, and go again. Dare to question, and don't forget in legal cases, you take advice, but you give instruction. Keep sentencing, keep sentencing, keep sentencing. Absolutely. Unless you're not wise, you will have in your mind where you want to go with the case. If you are deluded, that's a different thing. But it's because you're in court, your advisors are your solicitor and your barrister. And it's very, very important to keep that in your head. This isn't a control thing, but yes, take the advice, take your views, take your time looking at it as well. Not towards the end of a case, because that can get quite hot and heavy, but make sure you're fully abreast with all the facts on how it can go. Also, it's a bit mumbo jumbo, this, keep the mind free. Emotions can just set you off on completely the wrong path. And it goes back to that thing where I say, don't react if you can. If you pivot, revisit the whole case, like I said, and look at all the ramifications, because they can be huge sometimes. This was one of my favorite cases, in that the farmer wants a wife, sounds like a little children's poetry there. The farmer, he wasn't in good form, the farmer. He was, I think the new phrase is mental health problems, but he was also, unfortunately, subject to drink problems, and was with us some days and not on others. His long-suffering wife, I'm going to call it that, was a beautiful woman, and it was great to get the deal for her. Going back to that thing, yes, you do it for the money, but B, it's about the people. Quick précis of the case. So we had a bit of land, we got a bit of planning permission on it, and we sold it, and we should have got £4 million. We exchanged, got our 400,000. That was lodged with the solicitors, and it came to completing, but the contract wasn't fit for purpose, the plans weren't fit for purpose, and the title wasn't fit for purpose on quite a few different points. So what it essentially, it gave the purchaser the ability to basically not complete it and shunk on the deal. Prior to that, on the basis that we had exchanged, the bank had extended a decent-sized bridging loan so that our client could extend his farm in terms of land holding and or the quality of the buildings, etc. As his son, who's a good man, was coming through and he was ready to take it to the new level, right? So we borrowed, excuse the noise, we've got builders downstairs. We borrowed 1.25 million. And as that was a bridging loan with its, and they say it's a little while back, so not quite as competitively priced, but that ballooned to 1.86 million. So we were brought in at that stage when the bank were looking to say, right, we want the farm you bought, and we're looking at your farm as well to take that back. So it got a bit hot and heavy. So the case had the original purchaser, that went into litigation. The case went on a bit to try and enforce the sale. As we got to the steps, because our case was so weak because of the title issues and the planning issues, etc., we had to settle on the steps, and we took 500,000 full and final settlement after cost. Da-di-da-di-da. We ended up with about 700,000 in the bank. Now the bank, who gave us the bridging facility, wanted all of that. But we said, hang on a minute, we should have been able to sell that land and we shouldn't be in this position. This was, and I'm not a great fan of bashing professionals for negligence. So there's, all sorts of ambulance chases out there. But this is one of the worst instances. And I'll give you a little bit with the barrister in a minute of how it panned out. So it was undoubted negligence. If you had two pieces of paper, they were on the wrong angle, you had drains going over there, plans that didn't give the right sight lines. We had to go and buy land to get sight lines and everything else. It was like an exam question. To the extent when we saw a pretty useful barrister to start with, he said he thought we could get the money that we had to pay out for the sight lines back, which was about 400,000. And we said, hang on a minute, that can't be right. This sale should have completed, but for the fact that the legals were up the left, title, etc., and the planning was defaulted. It was defective. It cannot be. We should have been able to have the benefit of that. So consequently, a bit of, and it was a wee bit heated with our barrister friend. He didn't really like us pointing out that he may be wrong, because they really are. And we said, right, it's 4.5 million. It's the 4 million less the deposit, plus costs, plus interest, plus da-di-da-di-da. We ended up with a claim with our barrister, full staff behind it, of 4.5 million. And in his commentary, he actually added the negligence was of such a magnitude that it bordered on deliberate. And that was such a strong thing that he put in there, which gave us a great sway through the case. So off we went. As I say, we were dealing with a backdrop where our client was struggling mentally, very difficult times he was having. So we were driven primarily for the benefit, obviously, of the client, but also his wife and his son, who's, he didn't need this rubbish. So on we went. Long story short, we settled at 1.4 million. You're never going to get anywhere near your client. You're never going to get near it. So consequently, as you can see, there we're on about 30% of what we put into the 4.5 million claim. And that wasn't even that easy, because we then had our barrister and a QC involved, and they decided that we should take £1 million and, to all intents and purposes, agreed it with the other side. At which point, I sent them back out. We had a big fallout. Our client wasn't up to it. His wife, unfortunately, completely broke down, because I knew we had to go and sort something out with the bank. So we went back to them and had an argument all week, and eventually we got the 1.4. So that got us to a position. Then we reverted back to the bank. They'd had, I think we'd given them about, of that 700 at the beginning, we gave them about 250, and then we gave them another 1.35, and which ended up basically, clients made no money out of it, but they retained both parts of the farm. A really convoluted case, which could nearly warrant its own wee mini film, because it was everything, everywhere it went, it was hard work. It got down to a punch up the end. even with their own team, which is very often the case. You have to be very careful to get to the end of cases because agendas change. And it was a very difficult case, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't very nice, especially from the good lady wife, what she went through in every sense. We got there in the end, paid the farm, and the bank, within reason, was satisfied. Again, a wee bit of a punch up with them, but we had the money, they didn't. So within reason, it was what they were going to get. So we positioned all of it. We even positioned a bit of tax in all of this. So it was a tough old case. Then in a recent webinar, we were talking about insolvency practitioners. We were talking about litigation funding, which is becoming more and more prevalent and is going to be huge going forward. At the moment, it's slightly under the radar. And this is where, if a case has some merit and it's supported by counsel's opinion, this is basic terms, then funders will consider it and they say, right, it's £1 million litigation and it's 100 grand of costs. They will look to fund the costs. Okay. Now, that is not good news to start with, but we need to break down their actual involvement and relationship to the deal. Nothing else, just the deal, their relationship, because that's all they're after. If they're going to put 100 grand in, they want to know what they're going to get back. So if a case is funded, very often it's very aggressive at the beginning, and you've got any amount of costs, you've got any amount of experts, you've got any amount of threats and everything else. As per that insolvency practitioner who run up 100 grand like that with little or no consultation with our client. But that's okay, keep that there. What is strange at the minute is you have to be able to determine in your own mind whether a case is litigation funded. And these are being used in divorce. I know a gentleman who's a good lady wife that they're divorcing, another ugly case, but she has got litigation funding. And we've seen it again. They absolutely fly it at the beginning because they just want to spend the funding. And it's, they'll deny it and everything else. I may upset people. On the cases I'm seeing, that's the approach. Let's get it out there. There's a pot to spend. Let's get it spent. Doesn't solve anything. It makes it very, very acrimonious at the beginning because everything is thrown and probably stokes the fire more than it should. But like I say in there, you cannot decipher, and the other side don't have to tell you if they're litigation funded. I think that has to change because it's so paramount to how courts work that everybody is on a potentially on an equal basis. If you've got an outside party pouring money onto a case, then that's a different ballgame. So the big high-profile cases that are going on, that Manolette are on, and everything else, they're notified. But in these smaller ones, we've just seen one where we're pretty sure they were, and they denied that they were, but we're pretty sure they were funded. Now, this can be in a strange way. So it's quite painful at the beginning very often because all the litigation firing in writs, witness statements, huge piles of paperwork as they love to run up, all come flying in. But at some point, when they start to get through the costs a bit, the litigation funder is still looking for his pound of flesh here. There are various rates quoted as to what they're looking to return, but between 50 and 100%. 25 and 100% on what they invest. So they're looking at the commerciality of their deal. As a case progresses, and if you can do that a bit like I was saying, and you don't react, you act, and you draw the fire here, sometimes it gets to a stage and right, okay, we're getting towards a standstill. That is no good for litigation funders. They want the case, yes, they'll be patient, but if they don't see the merit in the case as they've gone further down the track, then that can start to bring them in to the commercial decision. And usually the contract is signed by that side saying that the litigating funders can be involved in the decision process. If you can see that is the case, as we did in this divorce, then that can be quite good because the solicitor has to start thinking about how he's going to bring the case to a head. Common sense starts to prevail, but not always. But it does become more of a commercial decision. What we have to do for our clients, if we're taking that view, we have to say, right, hang on a minute, this could be litigation funded. We don't want to match them spending 100 grand in 9 months, like I said in that previous example. So it's a case of controlling the cost as best you can. And that's where you need a good solicitor who isn't just there turning the egg timer over every half hour. yeah, they've got to earn their fee, and good solicitors, 100%. But they need to understand the context, because 100 grand is being spent on the other side doesn't mean we're spending it. And like I say there, the same principles apply throughout. Keep in your head, especially with litigation funding, it's a little bit like holding your breath just for a minute. So we wing through a fair bit there, and all we're trying to do is say we're just trying to, with these webinars, we're trying to genuinely put something back in terms of what we do so that people can see a bit of context. Obviously, we're trying to market ourselves here, but that's why we do these. I know I've got somebody said the other day, you've got a voice that will grate cheese. That's fine, but what I am is very emotional about what we do and very strong in what we do, and I believe in what we do is very good for our clients. This part is genuinely free. If there'll be a couple of contact details in a minute. If somebody's got a few questions about something they want to consider, you can either email me or call me. The number will be at the end there. I might struggle to get back today, but I'll be around tomorrow. If you want to discuss a case in more depth, then if you want to send an email, but that's fine. And genuinely, from this point, the advice is free. If you want to go on a bit, then hopefully we can get you to be a client. But as is, if there are questions to ask, if there's anything that's you're not sure of and you just want another opinion, just fire something across to us. So as you say, that's what we do. Just give us a call, ping us an email would be best, and then I'll give you a shout whenever. If you give me a couple of times, I'll call you back. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be moving a little bit away from the webinar format, because we recognise it's slightly becoming, as we say, they're a bit of old hat. What we are doing, we're looking at a few more podcasts. Now we're getting our quality up a bit. The quality of the light here is due because of the flat light with the snowy sky. So apologies for that. But we're looking at podcasts, and a couple of those have been pretty interesting. Some great old people there. Old people? Poor old David Buick was a great guy. We had a sing. We're also looking at Q&A sessions, which aren't so easy for these types of cases, but very often we don't know how yet we're going to do it, but we're working on it. We're working on workshops as well. And again, generally in those initial inquiries, I think everything's free. If somebody wants to go off and say, yep, I'll have that and go away and do it. In this sort of work, it doesn't work like that. And genuinely, a lot of client inquiries come to us. We give them the advice, and we give them more or less everything. Off they go to try and get it done cheaper. But I'll come back to the S word, stamina is not always there. So what we are doing as well, because I'm trendy apparently, is we're looking at Clubhouse. And I think this is going to bring everybody into a different approach to how advice is given. If you're not a Clubhouse aficionado, I'm not. I'm going to find out after this when I speak to our marketing people. What essentially there, it's an audible form of discussion. Okay, it's not the written. It's not a Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. It's all audible. Some of the stuff I've been listening to America's a little bit BSy, but hey, welcome to America. That's the route we're going to be going down. If anybody has any great desires to speak to us, always here. If you want that brief, quick chat on it, no problem at all. That's what we do. That's how we try and market ourselves. So that's us, belcomp.co.uk. There's my email address and there's our number. If you want to ping me an email, just, for a friend and all that sort of stuff, you're very welcome to. And hopefully some use. Fairly whistled through it like I usually do. So apologies if you didn't pick everything up, but that's how I talk. And thanks for your time. Good luck. Bye now. Cheers.